Hey, Black Thought is so great. He's the one rapper where everybody just agrees. Like, you can log on Twitter right now and see some Nas slander or a hot Jay-Z take. Niggas don't even have hot takes for Black Thought. But rightfully so, dude's a legend. He's like top 5 or 6 all time for me. His discography just with the Roots alone is already a top 3 or 4 discography in hip hop. And then in these last couple of years, he's been building his solo discography as well. He's teaming up with L. Michaels Affair on this one, who is a band. Yeah, that's all I got. I don't really know nothing else about them. But the lead musician is a white dude named Leon, so you know it's some soul there. And who better to team up with a band than Black Thought? Let's get to it. I was expecting nothing but live instrumentation. They brought Shabba out.
3 for the money, 2 for the hustle, and 1 for the nighttime. Spread over the city like a comforter. Prime time for the
That's a bar. Nighttime spread over the city like a comforter.
Carrying them high notes like a trumpeter. They shoot it straight as arrows.
I like that bar too.
And run through the shadows as sons of a gun or dirty young caballeros.
I like this imagery.
Marks on their collars where they hung from the gallows. Their lust for the dollars keep them red like the tarots.
Keep them red like the tarot card readings.
And people, Dale Carnegie's with big dreams to get rich quick that fail horribly now.
I like how you comparing street hustling with entrepreneurship and like the American dream of getting rich.
Business as usual to blow out your wig like French poodles. Never ending pursuit of the American dream.
Ooh,
when it
like
takes everything is still a regular thing. Listen, filling the Frigidaire, big plates and silverware where everybody eat except the one who was ill prepared.
I like that little dining room scheme, refrigerator, food on the table.
We was raised by wolves, grizzly bears, and panthers is wild. Yo, I'm surprised we ain't grow no antlers. The whole house is fucked like JoJo dances.
Okay, he was punching in that first verse. He's scheming now. I like that. We was raised by wolves and panthers, little Black Panther reference. Then saying how it was wild, surprised we ain't grow antlers. I like that scheme a lot.
If one thing them young boys not playing is games, now that'll teach an old timer how to stay in his lane.
Not that I really had an idea of where this was going, but that was not what I expected. The instrumental felt like this fusion of like a live funk band and traditional rap instrumentation, because you had the sample flip, which I wasn't expecting at all. On top of this like woozy flute, and then you had these guitar riffs and then a full modulation into a guitar chord. The beat wasn't explosive per se, but it was a really interesting beat. Absolutely love the rapping from Black Thought. He painted that picture of street hustling. I would predict that the glorious game that the album's about is that game of getting rich, and I like how he compared it to traditional like business aspirations. That might be something he touched on a little bit later in the album. The punching was there. He had a couple of schemes that were fire. Tough verse. I like the beat too. This is the title track, Glorious Game. That single chorus sounds super watery, and I like the bass line. Real mellow beat.
Okay, too black for y'all to erase. Shoot too straight for y'all to replay.
I like that, too black for y'all to erase. He could be playing on his name, Black Thought, and the color of his skin, but you know, you bear down with a pencil, you can't erase it.
Gloves and masks off, time to blast off. Baton I pass off, round your ass off. If we clash, I'll haul the trash off, then haul the cash off and ball an ass off. You see, life like mine once a lifetime. When some young gun becomes an icon, but somehow they'll cut down the flight time unless they send that heat down the pipeline.
The first song was more so about his environment, and this verse seemed like he's bringing the attention back to himself. He did a little bit of bragging, especially on the first half of that verse, but then he brought it back to like him being a leader, and it seemed like he was alluding to getting out of that lifestyle. Those lines about him flying and them trying to clip his wings, that line stood out to me too. And also that flow is sick. Pimpin' ain't dead, Mackin' ain't dead.
No gas, I'm high in octane. Which icon am I if not flames? Goddamn, guess who not lame to lock the block down before the blockchain? Stop playing the sticks.
Yo, that's tough. That's a tough flip. Lock the block down before the blockchain, because chain, lock, wordplay, and before crypto, blockchain, that's hard.
My grind is hard to explain. I contain one marvelous brain. I flow like a nautilus, man. Damn, I love this glorious game.
Alright, I'm rocking with that one too. The beat was really understated, but I do like the vibe of it. It had this submerged in water feel with a pretty dope bass line driving it. I thought the flow from Black Thought was special. He kept that same cadence from start to finish. It sort of gave the song like this motif. Every 4 bars was like a different snippet of Black Thought. And this song had this braggadocio female overtone to it, but to me it felt like it was giving the impression of he was getting his like swag and his style from that grimy street upbringing that he talked about in the last song. Super mellow song, but I thought it was a solid one. This is I'm Still Somehow.
Push come to shove once and for all. Moments of pause, answer the call. If it's the last dance, with that said, it's the last chance to evolve. Being a CAT scan, I can't stand when the drug starts wearing off. What they would call going through withdrawal. Nothing to fear but fear is all. Nothing to ward these spirits off. Better prepare for a tear to fall. I say 3 sheets to the wind, then I repeat dumb shit again. Yo, they was vibing on psilocybin.
So he went from like the macro talking about being black and looked like he getting granular talking about himself with these last 2 lines.
Criticized, but it's still a problem to get a rise from the threat of violence. That's a gateway like Ellis Island. We should take time.
Gateway like Ellis Island. That play into him talking about America too in the first couple of lines, because Ellis Island, that's where the immigrants used to come in.
May as well keep living lawless. If I face charges regardless, I'm a race now from the margin.
Like
somehow
that.
Still a living target. I thought to collect the orphan. They never say shit about a coffin. All the tools that we have is hammers. That's exactly what we were brand.
All the tools we got is hammers. Come on, man.
Say black joy is rebellion. A happy black boy's like an alien. I see what ain't failed yet it's failing. So we adapt that of a chameleon.
Man, I like that even more than I like the first 2 tracks. That's my favorite song of this album so far. Those guitar chords sounded good, but it's really those vocal samples that I think made this beat really enjoyable. Black Thought was over here rapping the hood nigga blues. I like that progression of him rapping about growing up marginalized in America and then him applying that to himself. The first half of that verse felt like a lament. Like it felt really bleak and depressing, and then he brought it back with the last like 6 or 8 bars where he pretty much explained himself triumphant over that. And I think lyrically that was a really well crafted song. Then on top of that, he had another really smooth bouncy flow that was pretty sick. This is Holloway.
Not about pride, and if you was outside, you made a home before it was dark out. To play the couch with pop, the smart route. Cause it's not for hopscotch when that chalk out. And it's not the pop lock when they dance.
Oh, that chalk out's not for hopscotch. He was talking about where he grew up, he didn't want to be outside. You better be back in the house. The chalk was for when niggas got chalked out. That's tough.
When they hands on you, was sick and they mans on you. Times is
like
terrified. You gotta keep the fear in check like it's verified. Some boys took their respect,
Check,
some
verification
never
check.
tried. They said you never raised, you couldn't fare through the toils and snares. You be in people's hearts and minds, thoughts and prayers. Lead the street shit.
That's such a cold line. If you grow, you be in niggas' thoughts and prayers, you be dead. That's fire.
Trying to take food from wolves and fighting with bears. Who the big angels walk like Egyptians. Bangles, the scripts getting flipped. The whole hood on angles. And when it's brick out, you know to slow down your big mouth. Cause niggas be in the cut with guns that's big enough to huff and puff and blow down the brick house. The sight of make you.
He's mentioned growing up around wolves multiple times throughout both this song and throughout the album. And then he said guns big enough to huff and puff and blow your house down. The big bad wolves and 3 little bears or 3 little pigs, 3 little something. Nigglets, for all I care.
Extendos is so long it sticks out. Some big bros swore they was built and bitched out. Some Cub Scout caps was built to get clout. And then they switch routes, hack you for bad, do a snatch, then a stab, then collapse through the cracks like rats in a lab.
Hey, Black Thought not glorifying the street life at all, and he's still making it sound menacing. Especially in that first verse. That scene that he was painting is chilling. Yeah, it was one dire scene after the other. When the chalk comes out, it's not for hopscotch. That's my favorite line of the song. The 2 verses were separated into 2 different beats, and that first verse seemed like telling people stay away from the streets, and then that second verse was more of him saying what it took to survive in the streets. I thought both verses were pretty flawless. I thought the beat was good. The only thing is these are 4 like really understated, almost drab beats back to back to back. I guess some of it is tapering my own expectations because when I hear live band, they leaving out the live part. These are not the liveliest instrumentals. But that said, it was a dynamic beat. It had 2 different beats, and the weird sample that they started the song with and broke up the 2 beats with, I thought that was a pretty good touch. I'm rocking with that one, but for right now, I think all the energy is just in the rapping. It'd be good for them to pick up the tempo a bit. This is Protocol.
I'm from another planet, though currently I'm stranded here where I see people clearly.
the brightest beat so far.
To another standard.
This Gambit rhyme scheme, back to back is fire.
Language like a hopeless romantic. I display the
like
dynamics and play and pray it's organic. Maybe this is a fantasy, maybe I'm disenchanted. What if they just abandon me? Maybe it's how they planned it. Crazy, there's still a scar on my shoulder where I was branded. Got the sayonara or a war, I'm already spoken for. Focusing on finally doing something on my own accord.
You probably don't know how to read.
I wish they kept these trumpets in a little bit more, because that's my favorite part of the beat when they creep in.
Signage on the closing door said this ain't even home to y'all. Now I see that more and more. So sayonara or au revoir, just get me to that pyramid. My flying saucer floated towards. I'm laser focusing on doing something on my own accord.
Well, that was the up-tempo beat that I asked for. I think the horns were easily the most interesting element of that beat. It's a little shame that they was only in for like the chorus of the beat. For the verse, I thought the beat was good. Like the bass line sounds good, the drum pattern sounds good, but there's just no standout element to the point where it kind of just sound like background music, which I guess all instrumentals are, but you know what I mean. Too much in the background. I like what we got conceptually from Black Thought. He's building on everything he's been rapping about on these first 4 songs, but this is more so about how he's supposed to matriculate into normal society when those first 4 songs is his upbringing. Then at the end of the second verse is like him escaping this fantasy land when he was talking about going to the pyramids and escaping to a spaceship. And that line itself, I like what it alludes to. It's a jab at the fact that people said that the pyramids weren't possible and that they had to be made by aliens. Good song conceptually. The production is fine. It just don't sound groundbreaking. This is The Weather.
Sometimes the weather takes me back to the days of crazy summer.
Oh, they had a
without
modulation.
Blanche telling me to run and play the numbers. I'm trying to make it to the park to satisfy you.
So far, the best beats on here have had that vocal harmonization. I'm already liking this beat better than most of the beats on this album.
Power lines were full of pigeons of fly, sneakers that died a miserable death, hanging high in the heat. But our Philly was a marvel. I never be one to argue. The cracks.
Am I tripping? This song sounds like a live instrumentation version of Don't Cry by Jay Dilla. I was already thinking of that on the first couple of lines, but then when they have the beat switching up tempos, and just like how Don't Cry has a tempo change,
Made a marble of smell of pine saw.
it's also dope that Black Thought's remaining on flow with this tempo change.
Runners over the shag carpet. I'm not feeling wood paneling on the walls up to the drop, sealing all the furniture
Yo,
draped in thick,
hey.
transparent layers of
He
vinyl.
describing
All the
everybody
chairs,
grandma
the sofa,
house.
the record player kept me as if she say it is. In many crib, the time froze after sundown. You keep them curtains and the blinds closed. Watch how far back the lazy boy recline goes. Peppermints and a lazy Susan. Never mind those.
He describing where he grew up in Philly. It's got to be his grandmama house. But I can relate. The runners on the floor, the vinyl playing, the peppermints.
Box full of her possessions said, this side up. Last night a baby father came home, hide up, tight, talking about the way his money all tied up. Shades covering her eyes. What? We gon' ride, yup. Homie in for a surprise.
Yo, that's so fire. So the really clever thing about this is he's basically describing one house, and it's got to be like after his grandma passed and maybe a relative, whoever Keisha is, moved into it, and now he's telling this story of her. So like he was talking about the boxes, so this is the moving in part, or it could be a different house, but that's what I took from it.
I don't want from when we played half ball.
Oh, and then talking about the shades over her eyes. He described when his grandma, whoever that old lady was, put the shades over her, but shades over the girl's eyes like she got a black eye from her baby daddy.
We all chips off the block, the sips off the pop. We pass round like a hit from a split. You take 2 and pass it down.
Passed around like a split. We all had that same upbringing.
In the community, the only neighbor that never knock is opportunity. Them old heads be shooting crap.
He's talking about how everybody was close-knit. The only neighbor who didn't knock on your door was opportunity. Opportunity knocks. That's hard.
Cocaine prices up. People get their wigs peeled, shaking them dices up. I heard it's some weak brothers.
R.I.P. Takeoff.
Innocence is lost over crime. We was all before our prime. Some was married to the game, then divorced it over time.
The imagery from Black Thought has been good on this whole album, but the imagery on this one's on a whole different level. Him reminiscing on where he grew up, it was like that verse was in black and white, but every detail down to the concrete, the house that he grew up in. Then he had that shift to talking about domestic violence, and then he was talking about how he was gonna ride on the baby daddy who hit his girl, and then he took that and morphed it into how everybody grew up tight-knit. So like the connection on why he's willing to ride for her. I think he said her name was Keisha. That song was amazing, dog. Amazing. This is That Girl.
I pulled the flower from the garden, a pure floor, the jardine, a bloodline mix, the Philippines. Philippines with New Orleans. She got the whole wide world under her finger. When we were young, she came in and stung me with a stinger. My Nefertiti, Amina, Makiba, Maya Zinga, the light in which I'm a linger. I probably do anything for that girl.
I don't think he's talking about an actual girl on this song.
Aphrodite and never a true Medusa. She's never been too obtrusive, long as we've been exclusive. At first, love was elusive. This old heart was icy. The cold part, I thought to find a wifey wasn't likely. My lover friend, my spiritual twin, yet nothing like me, and rightfully so. I never met somebody more striking than yo.
Ooh, that's a really interesting song. He definitely was not talking about a girl in that song. Not literally. That was a metaphor. It had to be, because there was no like intimacy. He never described them being together, like actually together. And then the way he was describing the girl was too universal. So I said she had the world on his fingertips, and he mentioned us a couple of times and stung her, and the way he described her was like something that was attractive and something that he pursued, but it seemed too idealistic. It could have been love, it could have been the glorious game, the pursuit of like money, wealth. It definitely gave me like I Used to Love Her vibes from Common, which obviously was about hip hop. But tell me your take on that one. Once again, when they incorporate these vocal samples, I think the beats end up being a lot better. Some of these songs seem like they don't have enough there. Like it's missing one element to push a beat over the top. But the songs that have the vocal samples, those vocal samples seem like it's those elements that make the beat entertaining. I thought that was a super enjoyable song. Great storytelling. I think the whole thing was extended metaphor. This is I Would Never.
Haters will shoot they shot at you out of a moving car. We place our wishes of making it out on a shooting star. Be whoever you need to be, just don't forget who you are.
See, this is what I'm saying. All the best beats have had vocal samples. I like this beat a lot better than most of the beats on this album as well.
Be ever unique as artists. Truth should be easy to market. Seek out and shoot your target. That's word to Shanique with Jarvis. We rep Howard to Harvard and everything in between. Look how a fire was started, investing into a dream. My Rhodes Scholarship started with questioning who would lead. The messenger could become your profession if you believe your future.
So this is tough. He's been talking about that street upbringing, and now I don't think Black Thought went to college. He could have, but he mentioned a whole bunch of different colleges, Howard, Harvard, being a Rhodes Scholar, and he's using that to preach being authentic, saying whatever route you came is fine. You should be authentic to yourself, and truth should be able to sell, which it doesn't, but truth should be able to sell.
Climbing to reach the pinnacle only to meet suspicion. Trying to stand on your principles after being forbidden to go against the invincible algorithm of living when very woke. Standing arms folded in the scope.
Like
silhouettes and shadows, injecting syringes full of dope. When police.
Yeah, I'm rocking with that song. I think lyrically that was more straightforward than a lot of these songs were. So you didn't get as in-depth of lyricism and imagery on this song as you got on the previous ones, but it was because Black Thought had a clear message of being authentic and not forgetting where you came from. So I liked it. It wasn't the best verse on here, but I think this was one of the better beats here. The vocal sample was great. I liked how the drums sound, and then those groovy guitar riffs accented the beat well. This is Alone.
Challenges, you rose to a lot of those and passed with flying colors like the honor roll. With one school-age child, another not as old. You be grinding overtime, getting to that pot of gold. You move grown, you don't want it if it's not controlled. Even if you might not have known, you are not alone.
Nah, that Michael Jackson interpolation is sick. This is the best chorus on here by far.
You wanna take the bar exam, so you study law. Your favorite thing to say is I ain't stunning none of y'all. Driving Uber Eats just to make it through the week. Too discreet to be out here belonging to the streets. Careful of the company you keep. I mean, and if you can't see the poetry, you are the poem. Bless the child that's got a home.
Can't see
You're
the
not
poetry,
alone.
you are the poem. That's fire.
Now, you were not alone.
Yeah, hey, that's tough. I really see this concept of the album coming together of Glorious Game is this game of getting out of this bad environment. It's dope because of how objective he's talked about the different ways of getting out. He's really just describing a game of survival. When he talked about the people who play the game banging game, the hustling game, pimping, he hasn't been preachy with any of it. He's not even preaching at all. He's just saying how it is. But this song, he was giving props to the girl who was trying to make it out from going to law school, struggling, and he had a couple of really poetic lines like if you don't see the poetry, you are the poem. Like, you don't see the beauty in this situation because you are the beauty in this situation. I think that song was dope. I thought the beat was pretty good. And then I love that chorus with the You Are Not Alone Michael Jackson interpolation on it. This is Miracle.
Puppy love, sugar pie, honey child that always kept the vibe like 2 eggs upon the sunny side. Promise she would never front and never do me funny style. Lived across the tracks I came, cause I cared for you. Put lustrous pink oil moisture in my hair for you. I
might have to walk back me saying that girl isn't about an actual girl, because he's mentioned girls on Whether That Girl and Alone. He could be talking about the same girl, even though on the Weather, the girl like had a baby daddy. Well, unless Black Thought out here playing stepdaddy, that's another option.
And I can see your heart was right where Cupid had his spear pointed up, starts in a blowout. No way that we could know how 30 years into the future it ain't even safe to go out. With all my flyers garments on and can't show up to show out. It's to the past I dedicate what I'm about to pull out.
Or maybe scratch all of that. He could just be talking about Philadelphia and describing her as a girl. We'll see. Because he was talking about he can't tell what it is now. Those lines definitely describe the streets of where he grew up. And I think that's kind of like highlighting nostalgia, because the ironic part is the way that he described where he grew up in those first like 4 tracks, it clearly wasn't a great place to grow up. But when you look back on things, you look at it with like these glasses where you can only see the good in it. So he said he doesn't know what it became, but if you listen to the first 4 songs, it's not much different than how he described it at first.
Pick a fight or to pimp the system or just living life. I be trying to get into some mischief of a different type. We stay on the phone like we was grown, if you recall. Till your pops would get the trip and then I'd holler at you tomorrow. Making most the human connection like the ligament was torn. I'm just reminiscing back when kissing one against the law. Listen.
I'm about to stop flip-flopping for good. He was definitely rapping about a girl, but he was rapping about a girl to give the perspective of how he grew up. So it still falls in line with the themes of the song, but he was legit talking about an actual girl. It wasn't an extended metaphor in this case. It was more so him giving the perspective of the same stuff he rapped about through that relationship. But yeah, dope song. The beats, bro, the beats on here are like shy. They're good, they're fine, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just so understated, especially when there's no vocal sample on them, like here. But the keys did sound good. The drums have sound pretty crisp throughout. It's just the beat standing in the corner and I needed to be in the middle of the circle. You feel me? Dope song regardless. This is Glorious Game Reprise. All right, that was just the chorus of Glorious Game with some extra reverb on it. It had a cool little effect on it, and the saxophone at the end sounded good. Let's close this thing out with Alter Ego.
Around the age of 35, I began to lose my drive. I was wasted chasing time as if I was losing my mind. If your eyes, all is blue and black and ebony inside, they done cried, cause they seen too much to ever be surprised. Then they dry.
That seen too much to ever be surprised. That line is real.
I perfected imperfection. I've dealt with that collection. All my demons, I respect them. I'm a breathing intersection on the crux of my redemption. Not to mention re-inspired. Look,
breathing intersection, so like he's an intersection of all those things that made him.
I was running on empty. That emptiness would tempt me, and I felt like everything, even my shadow, worked against me. I sit there in the mirror, staring at myself intensely, thinking I should act my age. Shit, I'm approaching half a century. Axe the crux of my redemption, not to mention re-inspired. Looking out for me and mine since I told my alter ego goodbye.
I think that was definitely a proper outro. That definitely puts a bow and ties up all the themes and concepts of this album nicely. It's Black Thought's most personal track on this album. It's taking all of these stories and images and hardships that he described in the first 11 tracks, and he's basically saying this was makes him him, and he had the option of either letting that define him or using it to try and pass it. I feel pretty much the same about this song as how I feel about Protocol, where you don't get as much vivid imagery as most of the other tracks, but it's because he had a more straightforward message for you to take from it. So because of that, I think within the concept of the album is pretty tough. Overall, I think it's a good album. I think it checks all the boxes, technically speaking, but it does like a couple of the intangibles. I think the rapping from Black Thought is objectively extremely good. What he gives you from a lyricism perspective, a flow perspective, and then for him to have this succinct concept behind it. He narrated this concept of the glorious game of getting out this environment that he really vividly described throughout the album. I think the different perspectives that he used to kind of drive home pretty much a really similar point from song to song, whether it was just focus on the environment on Grateful, focusing from the perspective of a house on the weather, from a girl's perspective on That Girl, Alone, and Miracle. I thought lyrically Black Thought showed why he's one of the best to ever do it. I think by far the biggest thing holding this album back was the production, and the difficult thing about that is there was nothing particularly wrong with the beats. Like the drums sounded crisp from start to finish. Whoever was on the bass line went in, but it was just a lot of these songs lacked anything interesting with them. Like it was just a whole bunch of good elements put together, but a lot of them feel like it was missing one instrument or one thing to drive the beat home and make it feel more captivating. I don't think it was by coincidence that all the best beats had a vocal sample to it on top of whether it be, you know, a flute, a guitar, or whatever was in the melody. I do appreciate the heavy funk influence on this album as well, but I ain't gonna lie, half of these beats sounded like something I could study to. But even still, I think it was a really strong addition into Black Thought's discography and a good introduction to L. Michaels' Affair for me. Is it better than Black Thought's album from last year, Cheat Codes? Nah, not even close. I think the rapping is right there on par, but if you compare the explosive beats from Danger Mouse to the beats on here, I don't think they really compare. But if you take this album for what it is, I think it's still a pretty dope album.